My pleasure.
Welcome, everyone. We are super happy to have you join us today. We are having an incredibly great, fun, and knowledgeable and important member of the CRF family. He is Dr. Jess Thompson, who is the chair of the CRF Advisory Board and Research Advisory Board, and he's joining us from Arizona. So I wanted to say, first of all, we have had probably 8, 9 years now. We've had a mom's chat, and we've been doing some thoughts and having some conversations and thinking maybe now is the time to pivot or change a little bit and have a parents group. So, what better way to start off a new group with a great opportunity to learn about research, which is, of course, one of the things that we love to do. So let's get started. Welcome aboard, Jess. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, wherever we are.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
yourself, and about your family and what you do, and let's get
sure.
started. Oh, and one other thing, guys, I'm sorry, I'm a little off. Tonight, what we're going to do, just because we are recording this video and we're going to be sending it out, I'm going to maintain the chat and the Q&A features. So as Jess is presenting the materials, when you have questions, feel free to write them down, send them in, and I will give them to Jess kind of periodically throughout the night. So as something arises, feel free to ask your question
And
there.
then,
Sorry to interrupt.
and Beth, at the end, do you think we could just have can we just have an open discussion if it might be faster that way?
Certainly. We could do it
Maybe,
either
I don't know
way.
if it's possible. Yeah, but we'll
Yeah.
have to see. So, welcome everybody. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Jess Thompson. I live in Prescott, Arizona, which is just north of Phoenix by about an hour and a half. And we're kind of close to Sedona. Maybe you've heard of that. And so I am a cardiothoracic surgeon. I own my own practice in Prescott. Prior to that, I was in academic medicine. And so I have my MD degree, and then I got a master's degree in clinical research. And when we started our CRF journey or CHM journey in 2016, my wife was diagnosed, and then we subsequently we have three sons, but two of them are diagnosed with it. We have a daughter. We have two other daughters, and one of them is also a carrier. And so I started to pivot because I recognize that research is really what I'm passionate about, what I know how to do. And I thought that I could lend a hand to the CRF doing the research part. And so that's how we're meeting tonight. And so a couple years ago, they asked me to be the chair of the research committee and then also the chair of the scientific advisory board. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And so please, as you have questions, or if I'm not clear, either send your hand up or type it in, I guess. And then maybe at the end we can all just sort of have a big discussion for other questions. And I apologize. I was outside today and it was a little bit dusty and stuff, and if my voice is a little scratchy, with apologies. Um, I would just like to say that what I have tried to do as chair of the research committee is to do several things. My primary goal is to make sure that we are funding appropriate researchers and projects that will move our needle forward. And so, for example, the projects that we are looking to fund are not what I would call a one-off project. These are projects that can be foundational projects upon which other projects can be built. So typically, what we will do is a researcher or an investigator will come to us with an idea and give us a grant. And they've got a whole grant proposal, multi-page grant proposal that they have to fill out. And what we're trying to do is sort of these are what we call seed grants. And so it gets them enough data that then they can go to a bigger grant funding organization, for example, like the NIH, and then get big grant money. So our typical grants would be somewhere in the $50,000 to $100,000 range. And then when they're going to go to NIH, it's multi-million dollar. But it is clear that what we do has been very, very impactful because a lot of the research that we have funded has continued to germinate other research projects, and that's really our goal. And so first of all, we want to find projects that will continue to advance the ball forward. We're also trying to find investigators. To us, it's very important. There are two different types of investigators that we're trying to find. One is a very seasoned investigator. These are people with well-established labs, and they know how to do good research. We clearly want to bring those people on board. The second type of researcher that we're trying to attract to our kind of area of interest, that is choroideremia, are new researchers, but new researchers that have very solid mentors. And we're trying to do this specifically so that these new researchers, as they're beginning their career in research, that they will make CHM part of their ongoing portfolio. And I can give you some examples of what I'm talking about. So please bear with me because I'm trying to figure out how to do all this screen sharing thing. So let's see. Beth, are you able to see that, I hope?
We sure can. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I just want to show you, this is going to be a very fast overview of who are our science advisory board. So for example, we have Thomas Aleman at University of Pennsylvania. And as I introduce these people, I kind of want you to see the breadth and the scope and the depth of the people that help us on a regular basis. And we'll talk about more what that is. And so Thomas Aleman is a very seasoned investigator at Pennsylvania, at UPenn, and he's been very instrumental in a lot of the gene therapy trials and ongoing natural history studies. Lauren Eiton is a wonderful researcher. Now, you'll notice she's in Australia. One of the things that we have struggled with is who to put on our scientific advisory board, because if we have people in Europe, they're so far ahead of us in terms of time that if we're going to meet, it's often early in the morning for them. Now, a couple of years ago, I approached Dr. Eiton to see if she would be on our scientific advisory board, which she has agreed to do. And it's worked out wonderfully because if we have a meeting, and let's say it's at 6 p.m. my time in Arizona, for her, it's like 10 or 11 a.m. the next day. And so it's perfectly aligned with her time. So why I am belaboring this is because if you think about that particular time corridor, in that time corridor, you have Japan, you have Korea. If you back it up a few hours, you have all of China, all of India. And so we're actually now starting to look at researchers, investigators, and members for our scientific advisory board, literally on the other end of the world, because the other side of the world, because the time works out really, really well. So that's why I wanted to so we're trying to be really thoughtful and novel about some of the approaches that we take. Brian Balios is up in Toronto, and he actually just presented a wonderful talk at our last biennial meeting. Kathleen Bose-Battalier, she also is at University of Pennsylvania. She also presented at our last meeting. Now, you'll notice that she's a PhD. I'm going to back up a slide. Brian Balios is an MD PhD. So the MDs that do research, a lot of their focus is much more clinical. So they'll see patients. Dr. Bose-Battalier, she's a PhD, which means that she doesn't really see patients. So she's more interested in the basic science. And so on our research, on our scientific advisory board, we'll have a combination of both MDs and PhDs because we really want that healthy mix. Because it's very common that the PhD will say, well, we think this is important. And the MD can say, well, yeah, we also agree because clinically we see this, and vice versa. The MDs can say, hey, this is what we see clinically. And then the PhD can say, well, let's explore that this way. So just pointing out the difference between the MDs and the PhDs. Now, let me just stop a little bit more for Dr. Edwards. She just got her PhD. Now, you can see that she works in the David Gamm lab. David Gamm is an incredible asset to the Choroideremia Research Foundation. He's a very seasoned investigator, brilliant guy. Now, what's neat is that Dr. Edwards was working as a doctoral student in Dr. Gamm's lab. we have the Randy Wheelock Award, which we give out to a young investigator every year. Randy Wheelock, and Beth, you can explain who Randy is even better than I can, but Randy Wheelock was sort of the guru of research for probably several decades. He literally turned his life over to the research of choroideremia. And unfortunately, he passed away just a couple of years ago. And so in his honor, we have the Randy Wheelock Award. It's specifically for young investigators, and Dr. Edwards was one of our first recipients of the Randy Wheelock Award. Now, because of that funding her, we have developed a wonderful relationship with Dr. Edwards. She's probably going to go into industry, but that's okay because now she's sort of choroideremia is in her portfolio, and you can tell she's young. So for the rest of her research career, we are hopeful that she can maintain good allegiance and alliances with the Choroideremia Research Foundation. So just showing that we're trying to be thoughtful with who we recruit onto our scientific advisory board. Malia Edwards, a PhD at Johns Hopkins. She's really a specialist in the choroid and the plexus behind the retina. She is the assistant chair of the scientific advisory board, and she's wonderful. In fact, she and I are going to be at a meeting together that we'll talk about in just a minute this weekend. And she's been instrumental in helping us understand some of the basic science of choroideremia. Rachel Huckfeld, again, she's an MD at Harvard, MD, PhD. So she does see patients clinically, but she also maintains a very robust research lab. As you'll see there, she's the academic chair of the Scientific Advisory Board. So while Malia is the vice chair, Rachel is the academic chair. And I cannot speak highly enough about Dr. Huckfeld. She is absolutely wonderful. She's also important with the Foundation for Finding Blindness. And so it's great because all these people sort of know each other, and it's wonderful to have Rachel. As you'll see, Jasleen Jolly, she's again in Melbourne, and she knows Dr. Eiton, although they don't work in the exact same lab. But again, the same sort of concept of how can we get people, very good clinicians and researchers, literally on the other end of the planet, but the timing works out really, really well. And Dr. Kalatsis is in France, and she's been wonderful. She's had many good studies, and we've funded her several times. Maureen McCall is absolutely phenomenal. She truly is a world expert on how to conduct research, how to do grant process. And she really, when we invited her to come onto our scientific advisory board a couple of years ago, we knew she would be good, but she really was just absolutely hitting home runs. She really helped organize our scientific advisory board and our grant review and process. I cannot speak highly enough about Dr. McCall, who truly is a consummate professional at research. Chris Moen suffers from choroideremia. He's an MD. He's our chief medical officer. He's actually been president of our organization. Wonderful support to have Chris. Dr. Sharma, you can see she's at National Eye and Ear Institute. Now, in the lab that she works in is Dr. Kapil Lotan, who it's nice that they kind of work together, and they're working on a pig model or porcine model of choroideremia for us. Basic science. Now, interestingly, here we have Dr. Sharon. You'll see that Dr. Sharon is actually in Israel. So when we have our scientific advisory board meetings, it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning for Dr. Sharon, and he still attends. And then Dr. Sina, she's in Dr. Gam's lab, and so she sort of took over for Kim Edwards. As Kim Edwards is transitioning out, Dr. Sina is transitioning in. And again, I can't speak highly enough about Dr. Gam. He is so busy that he cannot sit on our scientific advisory board. But it's nice that we continue to maintain that relationship through his mentees in his lab. Dr. Sang is a robust MD, PhD at Columbia. He's probably one of our most active SAB members. And then Ajoy Vincent is again in Toronto, like Brian Balios. Ian McDonald, he has been working on choroideremia for probably 30 or more years. He has been instrumental in the gene therapy trials. He is really an emeritus member of the scientific advisory board, but we still lean heavily on him. And on a personal note, all I know is that Dr. McDonald, for me personally, has been a mentor, and he has been so very generous with his time and expertise. So that really, those are the people that are on our scientific advisory board. And you can go back onto our research page and you can find them and read more about them if you would like. But I really hope that what I was able to show you is that we have a really wide net of individuals, of expertise, of both MD and PhD. And the primary purpose for the SAB is so that when we get grants, they look at the science of the grants. And what they do is, so even though some of these individuals, they may not be subject matter experts in whatever the grant is over, they still understand, they write grants themselves. That's what they do professionally. And so they understand what a good grant is. And so they can really weigh in on this is good science or bad science. That's one foundational thing they do. The second thing that they do, and almost, I would argue, almost as important, if not more important, is that as we get grants that come in, we look at them and we see, is this the direction that choroideremia as a field is moving? Meaning, will this, if we fund this research project, will it continue to move the ball, so to speak, forward? And sometimes we've had grants that come in and they say, it's interesting, it's actually not bad science, but the field is going in a different direction. And so we may not want to be able to fund this project. So they're very, very helpful for that. The other thing that we're starting to do with our SAB is get them in a little bit more involved with the day-to-day membership. And that is maybe, these are literally world experts in choroideremia and in vision and vision loss. And so we're trying to see how we can use them or what will be helpful for our membership to have access to these world experts, maybe through seminars or webinars or a Q&A session. So we're still working on that. I would just like to point out that all of these researchers, it's totally voluntary to volunteer their time. And so you can imagine that their time is precious, like everyone's time is precious. And so when they volunteer an hour or two to go to a meeting or to review grants for us, this is a really big deal for us. Again, it's all voluntary, and so we don't have to pay them anything. And it's an enormous blessing that we are receiving from these individuals. Now, I'm going to see if I can share one more thing here. And again, I'm, with apologies, I'm still sort of learning. Beth, did this come up, the
Yep,
research?
it
Okay,
sure did.
perfect.
It sure did.
Again, I just want to show you, we're going to go through a couple of pages here. The point obviously is not, there's not going to be a quiz at the end of this, but the point is I want you to just focus in on that we are funding a lot of research. Do you mind just closing that door? Just because Nick,
Hey,
we're
but just
funding.
hold on one
Yeah,
second before you continue. You're doing
yeah.
such an eloquent job. Thank you so much. What you just pulled up is the one that we just went through, unless
Oh, okay, hold on.
we're going to look at the grid, right?
Let me see if I can figure out how to do this. Give me two.
Yeah.
Yes, we're gonna look at the grid. Thank you. Thanks,
Oh,
Beth.
sure, sure, sure.
Trying to figure out how to do this. Let me see here. Okay, let me try this here. Okay, is that the grid now?
There you go. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Hmm.
Okay, so again, thank you, Beth. The point of this is I want you to see how many projects we're funding. That's number one. And so let me just show you that, for example. So this is our first page, our second page, and our third page of everything that we're funding. And you can see that that is a lot of work. That is a lot of work, and frankly, it's expensive. And so this is where having funds helps us. So the first thing I would like you to just notice is that's a lot of projects that our relatively small organization is funding. Point number two is you can look in the second column where it says project. You can see that we're doing all different kinds of projects, For example, the very first one there with Dr. Lecken Porter, that's choroideremia, that's transfer RNA. And then you can see the next line, development of a low vision endpoint. So on the first line, that's basic science. That's test tube sort of stuff. The second one is actually taking patients and how do you maneuver patients around. And so you can see that we're funding a lot of things. So for example, you go down, you can see Malia Edwards there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down. She's looking at collagen, which is a protein behind the retina. Anyway, I want you to see that we are focused on basic science. And then what you can see here, the third down with Dr. Gosick in Australia, one of our big focuses is also female carriers. Up until recently, very little, essentially no research was done on a female carrier. We now know that some female carriers are basically asymptomatic or have a few little visual changes throughout their entire life. We also know that some female carriers, what they experience is just as bad as the male people that are affected, meaning some of them are blind by the time they're in 60s and 70s or 80s. We don't understand why. And so, for example, with my wife, she asks a very basic question. Will I be able to see when I'm 60? We don't know the answer to that. And so this is why one of our big research focuses is also on the female carriers. We also know that whatever works for the male individuals that have choroideremia, we're hoping that whatever therapies come up, the female carriers will also get. I would just also like to point out down 3 from Dr. Gosick, you'll see Dr. Vincent there with CHM staging. This is very important to me. Because just one second, sorry, I'm on call. So I just want to make sure that I apologize for that. But so staging. So for example, when a son comes in and we find out they have choroideremia and we say, well, how bad is it? We sort of have an idea, but we don't really know. And where will it be in 10 years, in 15 years, 20 years? What's the progression of choroideremia? We don't really know the real natural history. So that's looking at that. And then you can see at the very bottom there, CRISPR. This is what won the Nobel Prize for gene editing, and Dr. Seabra, who's over in Portugal and Antes. Dr. Seabra has been in our space, choroideremia, for decades. He actually developed the first mouse model of choroideremia. So they're working on this CRISPR technique or editing of DNA. Anyway, just again pointing out that these individuals are across the globe. There's a wide spectrum of what we're looking at. If we knew exactly what therapy would work for choroideremia, we would be able to very much focus on that particular study. But we don't know, and so that's why we're casting a wide net. And we really feel like that wide net is thought out. We don't just throw money at any little project that comes in. What I would like to point out, though, is that mine and my wife's journey began with our family with choroideremia almost a decade ago. And when we first started, and I would attend research committee meetings, we would be lucky to get 2 or 3 grants in a year. And most of them were not really high quality grants. At our last grant review cycle, we had closer to 10 grants. And that was just for a 6-month period. We're about to, in December, twice a year, kind of in early summer and then in late winter, we have 2, what we call a call for proposals. And that's where we send out a communication to all the researchers and we say, hey, if you have a grant you want to potentially fund, let us know, give us a grant, and we'll take a look at it. So we do that about twice a year. And the process for that is we send that out. A month or 2 later, they send us a grant. The research committee, we divvy those grants up to all the members of the research committee. And then we all come back together and we score and rank those grants. And that's kind of how it's done so far. So I've talked a whole lot. Let me just maybe bring us all up to speed with what we are kind of currently doing. In the last 6 months, we've actually hired for the first time ever a chief science officer, Dr. Mike McConnelly. He is a career investigator in the neurodegenerative. He ran his own lab for many, many years. His life took a bit of a pivot, so now he's helping us. He's not full-time, he's part-time. And we're all of us have families and careers and everything else, and it's just hard to get things done. So we had a very generous member of our organization, the Research Foundation, who gave us the funds to hire a chief science officer. And the goal with this is for Dr. McConnell to be an accelerator, and he has absolutely done that. And really, this is an important milestone for the Choroideremia Research Foundation because it really takes us into a new level or a new league, so to speak. And so I don't want to downplay how important this is. Because we have Dr. McConnell, we are now starting to talk about the Choroideremia Research Foundation running their own clinical trial. Again, we're in the very early phases of this, the early stages of it. We actually are engaging our SAB about this. And so this would be a groundbreaking moment for the CRF if we are able to do this or choose to do this. We're going to do it thoughtfully and carefully, but this would take the CRF community at least the research aspects of it in an area where we've never been before. And so I think that these are very exciting recent developments that we've had. Another thing that we are doing is about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, we had a mouse model. It's the best that we have, but we wanted to see if we could do better. So we are currently funding a project that might be a better mouse model. So we're looking at that. The other thing we've done is we've actually worked with an investigator at the National Swine Center, which is in Missouri. They house all the swine for the national government that are research projects through National Institutes of Health. And it's this big facility that they have there. And so he is trying to help build for us a porcine model, a pig model of choroideremia. We've come close. We're not there exactly yet, but there are things that the pig's eye is obviously larger than the mouse eye. And the investigators around the world have said, look, if we have a bigger eye, we could do different things. And so that's very, very exciting to us. And so we're still working on both of those, a new mouse model and also a new porcine model, because there's just more things you can do with an animal that you certainly can't do with humans. Another area of interest, strong area of interest for us we're looking at and exploring other gene therapy options. There are researchers, for example, a very well-known researcher in Oxford, and Dr. Alaman, who's in University of Pennsylvania, who's on our scientific advisory board. These researchers believe that although the gene therapy trials did not meet their primary endpoints, that perhaps the primary endpoints weren't what we should have been looking at. They believe that the gene therapy might have been beneficial, and so they're now going back through their data to see if, hey, is there still some value and merit to having gene therapy? So that's an important development. Another very important development is that there's a organization called Spark, and they ran one of the gene therapy trials. Spark was recently bought by a bigger firm called Roche. And they had all this data, and Roche wasn't really interested in choroideremia, so they had all this data, which we asked for, and they've given it to us. And so we're trying to plow through this data to see if we can, what it holds for us. And so, in fact, what we've done is Dr. McConnell has gone to a University of Virginia, and he's actually got several undergrads using the data that we've been able to get for a capstone project. So they're able to go through, synthesize, organize the data to see if we can find anything that might be helpful for other investigators in the future. And again, this is something that the Choroideremia Research Foundation has never done, meaning primary research that's been initiated, that the project itself is being run, so to speak, through the Choroideremia Research Foundation. So again, this is a very new and exciting development. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to show, but just having the methodology of doing this is very, very important in my opinion. And really what the thought is that there are some research organizations, sorry, there are some disease organizations, for example, cystic fibrosis, where they run a lot of different trials and it's been very, very beneficial for their membership. And so this is something that we're looking at and we're just barely now starting to dabble, put our big toe, as it were, into that field. So these are some of the new recent developments that I think are exciting because it's really taking our organization up a notch, so to speak, as regards research. The other thing that we're trying to do from a research standpoint is how do we get this information out to our membership? Because a lot of the research that we're looking at is very, very preliminary, although it's exciting. And so I would like to hear back from you guys. So, as you guys have questions or concerns or comments or ideas, please either email me or call me, but get a hold of me somehow because I want to know what's good for you guys because this organization is our organization. And so please let me know what you want and what you need because we're certainly happy to help do that. Beth, I'm going to just stop there for a minute and I don't know if there are questions that have come in or if people want to get on, however you want to do that, I'll leave that to you.
Sure. I think this is great timing. It's a great time, folks, if you want to use that chat feature, the Q&A, to send your questions in. We did get one question I'm going to pose to you in a minute. Um, Jess, that was really good. And you did it so well and so fully and succinctly in half an hour. That was really good. Um, I think that if I could just share with the group, I know many that are on with us tonight and so many more that are going to be watching this in the days ahead, the recording of it. We have been working really a long time and very hard on research, but what I think has changed since I've been involved since 2006, the depth of the bench, if that's the way to say it, and the strategic way in which our science advisory board are, are are going after and building the breadth and the depth of this research internationally and within the US. I think one question just that people will ask if they're not asking it now, I think the logical question, and you being a parent will understand, we don't hold the crystal ball, we don't know the timelines, and as many of our researchers have said, we can't give you a time. Would you say any of these projects or any of the like gene therapy or stem cells or so on would is taking the lead, in terms of the horse out of the gate? What is your sense that would get us potentially to a treatment faster?
That is a great question. And I wish I had the answer.
Mm,
Because if I had the answer, then we would know where to put all of our chips.
yeah.
The issue is that all of these seem to be like they're right on the cusp. So for example, I showed that project that's tRNA.
Mhm.
So just sorry, I'm getting
No, you're on call. It's okay.
yeah, no, they've got someone on the I'm gonna have to let me just tell them I'll be there
Yeah, for
shortly.
sure. Yeah. For those watching, it's kind of fun that
Sorry,
Jess
I
has to take
apologize.
these
This is
calls. Yeah, they're important.
um so for example, with choroideremia, 30%, they have what happens is as the DNA is obviously in all choroideremia patients is has a mutation. But for 30%, what happens with the mutation is the DNA, as it's making a protein eventually, the DNA code stops the protein. And so several of our projects, what they're looking for is, even though there's this defect, is there a medication that one could take that would allow the DNA to keep making the protein and avoiding this gene therapy and and avoiding this protein that's not made. And so those projects I find to be very, very exciting. And we have different investigators that are looking at from different angles, because that would be very, very exciting, actually. Excuse me again for my voice. The other thing that's interesting is, for example, this weekend, as I mentioned, I'm going to Baltimore. One of our members is the president of the American Society of Matrix Biology. And so the matrix is all the molecules and stuff behind the retina that the retina sits on. And really all of your cells in your body are housed in this sort of matrix, and you do have some that's in the retina as well. And so I'm going to chair one of the meetings, one of the seminars at his meeting, and he can do that because he's the president. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to expand the footprint of CRF to individuals that have never even heard of CRF. And so Malia Edwards, who's from Hopkins, right up the road there in Baltimore, will be there because in effect she's a matrix biologist. And so we're trying to wave the flag because if we can get a matrix really what happens with choroideremia is the matrix is affected and dies. And then the photoreceptors die, and then you go blind, or you have night vision loss when you're a young man, and which can also affect women. And so part of what we're looking at is these matrix biology. Like for example, Dr. Edwards, Malia Edwards, who will be at the meeting. Basically, she's looking at the matrix biology, and so, because if we can fix the scaffold upon which the photoreceptors sit, then they will be happy. They will be happy and healthy. And so we're really trying to take a wide breadth at this. We clearly still have a hand in gene therapy. That's very, very exciting. And so, but what's going to be the lead out? I don't know the answer to that. I wish I did. Sorry. That's a great question, though.
That's okay. Hey, we have a couple questions. So before you have to skedaddle, we have somebody saying, here we go. Thanks, Jess, for the overview. I'm wondering if we are at a point where we are looking for more proposals or if we are short funding to cover the proposals we would like to move forward with.
That is a great that is a great question. I'll try to be a little funny, but it won't come off right. But politicians and researchers always need more money. Um, we I, and so this granting cycle, there were several projects that were deemed good science. They were also deemed in the lane that we think that the corpus of research is going. We just physically did not have the funds to fund them. And I'll just say, as regards funding, I view that as long as many members, or maybe all the members of the research committee, but I personally view those funds as the word I would use for it is sacred, not in a religious sense, but every dollar that we get is a very hard-earned dollar that a family or friend has donated to us. And I know some of the sacrifices that people have made to give us that money. And so I view that the allocation of those funds, again, I use the term sacred, I view that is very, very important to not just myself, but to the research committee and also to the board that votes on final projects. Because funding is scarce and because there are sacrifices that are big sacrifices that are being made to give those funds, we try to safeguard those as best we can. So we try to be generous, but we're a stingy generous, if that makes sense. So, but funding is paramount. We are, if you think about the name of our organization, the Choroideremia Research Foundation, our primary purpose is research. And Beth does an incredible job with a lot of other things, and we have mom groups and book clubs and all kinds of neat social activities. But I'm grateful that still our primary focus is not just it's important to have the social support, and we have people that do that, for which I'm very grateful. But I'm also grateful that our big emphasis is research. Because if we weren't doing it, no one would be doing it because we're such a small area.
That was really well said. Um, do you know what? There's a person that wrote in, I think it was Daryl, just no last names, just saying if you could send your question back in. I answered it to you directly, and I went back to retrieve it and it's not there. So if you could type that back in. We have another quick question saying, I saw Robert McLaren on the list. Is he working on something new or is this his original gene therapy work?
So Dr. McLaren is in Oxford, and what he's doing now, he is working on a gene therapy, another gene therapy trial. Um, he's a little tight-lipped about it, appropriately so, because there's a lot of intellectual property and proprietary things there. And so we're very excited for what he's going to do with that. But with the gene therapy trials, none of them met their primary endpoint. And what that means is that when they went to the FDA said, hey, we need you to read on the, the eye chart with the big E at the top, and then the progressively the letters get smaller and smaller and smaller. The FDA said, we need you to read 3 lines better. So if you're at this line, we need you to read 3 lines lower. And that's the endpoint that the FDA said. Now, the Choroideremia Research Foundation said that's not the appropriate endpoint. Many of the researchers said that's also not a good endpoint. And so, another project that, for example, Dr. Alaman is working on and Dr. McLaren are looking on is those individuals that had gene therapy, have they had stabilization of progression of disease? Because even if we can't treat the disease, meaning let's say we can't make it all better, if we could stabilize someone's vision, to me, that's almost a home run. My son, when he was diagnosed with this as a teenager, I mean, he can drive, he can do computer work, he can watch a movie, he struggles at night when he's outside. But he can still do basically normal activities of daily living as a 16-year-old. So if we could treat him and if he could add stabilization of disease, that's a home run, in my opinion. Or if you take a 50-year-old person and you can stabilize theirs so that they can at least finish their work until they're 70 or longer, even if we can just push things out for 20 years, that would be a huge benefit for members that are affected with choroideremia. So we're not just looking at a treatment, we're looking at stabilization of disease. And so when we say a cure or a treatment, yes, gene therapy would be a definitive cure, but there's more to what is going to be beneficial for our members. So another area of interest, if you can Google it, science.xyz, I think, or it's called the Science Eye. So there was a guy that was working for Elon Musk, the Neuralink, and he broke off, made a ton of money, broke off, and he was literally sitting around with a couple of his buddies. They're all ophthalmologists at Berkeley, and they're having a couple of beers, and literally they told me this, and then they got this whiteboard and they started talking about what could they do. So they actually, it's very cool. This Science Eye XYZ.xyz or science.xyz. They basically want to implant a microchip into the back of your eye, and it would be like half the size of a postage stamp with 1 million pixels. And then you wear these glasses, which then put it onto this screen in the back of the eye. And so, that's what they're working on. And it's pretty cool, And so we're not just looking for a gene cure, we're looking for anything that will improve the lives of our members. So, and you can see that we're casting a very wide net.
Mhm. We have a great library on our YouTube channel too for folks. Just to go back, you'll see me too many times, but the researchers and the industry people that we have had in the last 18 months is profound. It's really good. Hey, Jess, we have a couple more questions. Can I ask them to you before you go?
Yeah, you bet, please.
Um, is research mostly towards stopping CHM in its tracks or to remove the gene during IVF, etc.? And then can the table that was shared be updated with a column for the location where the research is taking place?
Yeah, no, both good questions. Let me start with that second one. I think if you go to the web page, you can basically get the currently funded projects, which will have the title of the project and also the investigator and the name,
Of their,
or the location, I believe.
it does.
I believe it's on there.
Mhm.
We just that's what we use for our what I showed you is every time we meet as a research committee, we go through that because we remember what dates projects are coming due and when we need um, reports from investigators and progress reports, et cetera, et cetera. So we just sort of needed the space, so that's why we truncated there. Now, I might have already answered a little bit. Question number one is research mostly towards stopping CHM in its tracks. That's actually what we would like to do. That would be a home run in our opinion. But as I sort of explained or tried to point out, we're trying to sort of do it, we're trying to take any win we can get. And so although we are looking for stopping it in its tracks, um, even if we can get delay or delay of progression, et cetera, et cetera. With IVF, I'm assuming you're meaning in vitro fertilization. And that's a very fascinating topic. And so that's not only a fascinating topic, but that's also a topic that is um, charged for a lot of people when it comes to their beliefs. And so that would be a very, so for example, if someone wanted to, what that would mean is you would have an embryo, you would then fix the embryo and then implant the embryo. And from that embryo, you could, that's kind of the hope. That being said, we already in current technology, we could actually take your embryo. I can't. I'm saying we, the royal we, okay? Your embryo can be taken. They can actually test your embryo to see if it has choroideremia. And so, for example, in your men, 50% would, right? And in your women, depending on who's got what, um, that would also be the case. Um, but they could actually check your embryo for that. And if your embryo did have choroideremia, you just wouldn't implant the embryo. So although I don't have personal experience with in vitro fertilization, that is one way that within a generation or two at the most, a particular family could get rid of all choroideremia in their family moving forward.
Yeah, tough. Yeah, but yeah, here we go. That was
Good
a beautiful
question.
thank you from that. You bet. I think this is, you know what? I know you're pressed for time. There aren't any more questions coming in, but thank you. You know, your email, you can be reached at Jess Thompson at curechm.org. I know you've
Yeah.
got an email, and certainly, folks, feel free to take your time and go through the science section on the website. It was updated, and we're going through some more updates on the science part as well on our website. Jess, thanks.
Beth, I greatly appreciate the invitation. And for all those participants, thank you for being here. Please, I want to hear from you. I want to know what you want from our organization for our research.
Mhm.
I also want to know what you would find in terms of education helpful. We have the capacity to do that. We want to do that. Please reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you.
That's right. Thanks, Jess. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. It's been a wonderful time. We'll get back to the group in terms of what future parents' chats will look like, and have a good rest of your evening. Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
everybody.
All
Thanks.
right.
Thank you, Beth.
You bet. Good night.